like a girl. How boys are set up to hate girls. Welcome to the Hopefulist with me, Wendy McClure. A hopefulist is the woman who takes control of her life to feel vibrant, alive, and passionate. I help uncover the limiting beliefs that have held women back for so long so you can step into your true, authentic self and live the life that is truly meant for you. Because you matter. Yes, indeed you do. Thank you so much for joining me today. I wanted to say, hey, what's up to all of those who've been following me for a long time, and to explain that I'm probably shifting into a little bit of a different direction when it comes to the podcast. I'm evolving, I'm growing, I'm making changes. I really want to focus more on women living in a patriarchal society, and I have made that shift somewhat, but I think I'm going full force at this point. And I'm not absolutely positive, but I even think I'm going to change the name to change the conversation with the Hopefulist, because the only way that we are ever going to bring awareness of the patriarchal society that we live in is to constantly point it out and to continuously show people how it has been affecting us, women, for decades and hundreds and thousands of years. So I really feel that this is what I want to concentrate on now, because I think it's so important. And the conversations that we have are the ones that will make the proper change. And I like to use this as an example because I think that it really shows that things are worded, categorized, what have you, in a way that we often don't even realize how it can hurt us. For example, crimes against women. This is sexual assault, when people are raped, these types of situations. Now, in this situation, what they categorize it as crimes against women, it's kind of putting the onus on the women, which is how it is treated in this country. Oftentimes, it's not a very severe punishment or sentencing. It's very often, especially if they are young, a slap on the wrist. And we know as women, that is one of the worst things that you can do to somebody. And it's going to result in long trauma. This is something that you will be living with for the rest of your life, something that will impact you for the rest of your life. But when we talk about it, we don't even mention men, because men are 98% guilty of these crimes. So why are the men not even mentioned when they're being discussed? We somehow put this name on it, and it somehow becomes the woman's problem. It's not that somebody's done her wrong. It's that she now has a problem. And I know the way that it's intended, the way we always thought it was intended. But this is why we need to change the conversation and make it more about men's crimes against women or men's sexual assault. We need to put men in there because they are the ones doing the crime. And I just feel that these types of conversations are what is going to spark change when it comes to this patriarchal society that we have all been forced to live under for our entire lives. So this is what I would like to do going forward. I hope that you will enjoy the conversations and have an open mind as to how these changes are really necessary. And if you are new here, I thank you so, so much for joining in on this conversation as we work diligently to change the conversation. On to the quote of the day. This one comes from Maya Angelou. You may not control all the events that happen to you, but you can decide not to be reduced by them. And that's telling you to don't let people disrespect you. Don't let people put you in their little cubby hole and not let you out of that cubby hole. You need to do what you feel is right and speak up when you know that you need to speak up and be the person that you know that you are truly meant to be. So I wanted to start out today with saying, no, you are not imagining the disdain and disrespect. It has been happening since you were a child. Now, the title of this one is How Boys Are Set Up to Hate Girls. And think about this. This is a conversation that we need to have, a conversation that we need to change. Boys, when they are growing up, are berated when something happens to not cry like a girl, to not throw like a girl, to not even be nice like a girl. I saw a video from one guy and he said, why would anybody be surprised that men don't really like women? Because from the time that I was a child, if a girl fell down on the playground, everybody ran over to her and was like, oh, you poor thing, are you okay? Can you get up? They would help her. But when he fell down, he would get comments like, what, are you going to cry? You going to be like a girl and sit there and cry? So not only did he not get the same sort of compassion that women did, but then if he had the nerve to want that or act in a way that would get him some compassion and some empathy, he would be berated and say, oh, you're going to be a girl? You're going to break down and cry like a little girl would? These are things that we do not think about because it is the way that it has always been. Same thing with the term run like a girl, throw like a girl. What does that image conjure up to you? And there was this amazing video that always the Feminine Product people put together, and they were asking adolescent girls around, 15, 16, 17, how do you throw like a girl? And they were like, doing this wimpy throw that went nowhere. How do you run like a girl? They were like running like crazy, like not normal. And then they asked 9 and 10-year-old girls, what does throwing like a girl look like? They did just a perfect throw. What does running like a girl look like? And she ran like people run. So somewhere between 9 and 10, and then after adolescence starts, we get this feeling, this what's the word I'm looking for? This expectation that girls can't do anything. And I thought that this was very telling, that not only is it the men that have this idea about us, it is the women as well. So when you are growing up as a little boy and you're constantly being told, don't be like a girl, don't be like a girl, what do you think your thoughts are about a girl? Well, I imagine the thoughts are, I don't want to be anything like a girl. Why? Because you don't want to be like a girl. What kind of feelings does that bring up in you? That you don't like the girls. I think it's just common sense when you examine it in that way. And that's why we need to have a new conversation. We need to change this conversation when we are raising our boys and when we are raising our girls. We have to start them from the get-go. And there is only so much control that parents have, because there is all kinds of ways that boys and girls are treated differently in society, at school, at church, at daycare, at friends' houses. So it's even more important for you to try and get across what you can while you can to let them know that boys are okay, girls are okay. Don't berate your boy for wanting a little compassion and sympathy when they fall down and get hurt. And don't give your daughters the idea that they can't do things like boys can. Just another really quick example. As boys are growing up, they're encouraged to do outside activities. Go outside, ride your bike, play stickball, wiffle ball, what have you. Well, girls predominantly, and of course I'm not saying this is always the issue in each and every case, but predominantly, girls play inside where they play with dolls and they get a kitchen set and they get a play iron. And, girls are getting stuff that they're being trained to do. You know what I mean? Dolls prepares you for being a good mother. It's these little things that we've never thought about before that make such a huge difference. So what can we do in the meantime? Encourage your girls to speak up. You speak up and be an example for them. What is very prominent in society, especially in workplaces, is when a man tries to cut you off from speaking. And I've had this happen. I don't know how many times. So, one of the things that we can do in response to getting cut off or interrupted, say, I'm still speaking, or say, I haven't finished, or something like, I'd really just like to get to my point. In these situations, you have to go with your gut. Maybe think about the situation beforehand, and that way you have a response ready to go. Because when it catches you off guard, sometimes it can take you quite a while to think of what you should have done. So that's why, you look at the objections that could stand in your way before you actually get to that point so that you can plan for those objections or things that might actually stop your progress. But always go with what your gut is telling you. Your gut is one of your most important ways to direct your actions. And we often just dismiss that because we want to be polite. We don't want to come off as rude. We don't want to hurt somebody's feelings. Another example of that is you're standing in an elevator, and when the door opens, there's a man in there that looks a little shady, and you don't really want to get on the elevator. But instead of appearing to be rude and saying, you know what, I'll just take the stairs or I'll wait for the next one or whatever, because that may offend the man, we get into this box that can hold people and get stuck with no way out just because we don't want to offend somebody. And that is ridiculous. You need to be prepared to take care of yourself at all times. So if a man is offended that you want to wait for the next one, that's his problem. You're not saying anything to him or about him. I can understand why that would be offensive, but at the same time, that's not your problem. Your job, first and foremost, is to keep yourself safe at all times. Sticking with the work situation, if your ideas are constantly dismissed, ask, what's the issue with my idea? See if they can offer something that they think would make it work, make it better, make it into something that can be used. Because that's something that happens an awful lot in situations where it's not a even amount of men and women, where men are still predominantly in charge is the women are just dismissed completely. So keep speaking up, keep throwing your ideas out there, and when they dismiss them, ask them, well, why? What do you think is the problem with this approach? Again, go with your gut. So when a man is out and out rude to you, which I have been noticing quite a bit lately, you can either ignore him, because when you ignore them, it just shuts them down. They want to get a rise out of you a lot of times, and if you don't take the bait, they become very disappointed and disenfranchised with it. Or, if you have a hard time keeping your mouth shut, that's something I particularly have a hard time with. Tell them, I'm sorry, I don't respond to rudeness. I don't respond to anger. You can do this with a lot of issues. I'm sorry, I don't respond to being ordered around. Those are some of the replies that you can get or you can give when somebody is treating you in a way that you don't particularly appreciate. And another thing I wanted to mention here when it comes to changing the conversation, there seems to be this idea that a woman walking through a lobby, or a woman waiting at the elevator, or even a woman on the elevator, it seems to be perfectly acceptable for a man to look over and say to her, why don't you smile? What I feel like saying is, why don't you mind your damn business? That's just another way for a man to make his situation more comfortable, because it would be easier for him if you were all happy and jolly and, he knew if he could talk to you or approach you or what have you. But you smiling is something that benefits them. It's not to benefit you, it's to benefit them. So we are at this point here to make lives easier for men. That's what we've been doing for ever, is to make things easier for men, to make things more pleasant for men. But maybe you can come up with a couple of stock answers when a man tells you to smile, like, why don't you dye your hair? It would be more pleasant for me to look at, because that's all they're doing, is they're looking at you and they're trying to figure out if they can talk to you or what have you. So, it's the same thing when you say something to them like, oh, I really wish that you would wear cologne. Why don't you, any situation that would make it easier on your eyes, and this is why it's so much harder for us to come up with responses, because there are so many things that men can say to women, about, smile, or, saying something about their shoes or the way they dress, where, men, they typically, if it's a corporate situation, they're wearing a business suit, and there's really just not much you can do about that. But come up with a couple of responses that, frankly, I love. Mind your business, because that's not something that is any of their business. And you are not required to smile to make somebody else feel better. You don't respond well to taking orders. That's another response. I don't respond well to taking orders, but thanks for the input. Stuff like that. We need to point out that this is no longer acceptable, because it is no longer acceptable. So it is time to take our power back. And the way that we can do this the most is to be yourself, to be okay with being yourself, and stand up for yourself and speak for yourself. Plan out your responses, be ready, and be ready to to change these conversations. When you see an opportunity for it, take advantage of that opportunity and start making the changes we need to these conversations. And yes, it is a difficult thing to do. Yes, it can be awkward. Yes, some people will not like it. Change is supposed to be uncomfortable. That's why people resent it so much. That's why people rail against it so much, because it's not easy. And these conversations will not be comfortable. They aren't supposed to be. We're trying to change something that has been happening for hundreds and thousands of years. We can't have one conversation, then everything's going to flip and be our way. We have to have these conversations over and over again. But we can be the ones to make the change. We have to be the ones to make the change, because there is a war on women going on in this country right now. And we need to do everything we can to protect the generations that follow us so that they can continue to make their own choices, to make their own money, to do what it is that is best for them without having to rely on a man. Because that's what all of these bans and new laws and new situations are designed to do. They are to get us to rely on a man. Not as much education, not as much time in the workforce. The fact that they're talking about getting rid of no-fault divorce. The predominant person who files for divorce is the woman in the marriage. And if they take away no-fault divorce, that means that you have to prove that there's some sort of abuse, drug addiction, or violence going on in the marriage. You can't just leave because you're unhappy. That is not acceptable. So they're going further and further every day. They are trying to take more and more away from women so that they can have things back the way they liked them, with us living in a patriarchy and serving the patriarchy. Because don't misunderstand that the patriarchy is designed to make lives easier for men, certainly not women. So these are conversations we are going to have to protect those that come after us. I hope this wasn't too much for you. I know it was a lot of information. It was a lot of things that you may not have heard before. It was a lot of things that you may not typically hear from me. But I want you to be able to take your power back, to keep your power once you have it, and never let men take it from you or shame you for living life the way you choose to live it. Because you should always be yourself, no matter what anybody says. So I want you to go on out there and have a super badass week. I know you can do it, and you know that I am always here cheering you on. Thank you for listening to The Hopefulist. Please visit my website at hopefulist.com. And always remember, you matter.